Hey everyone, Bryan Barletta here from Sounds Profitable, and I'm very excited to walk you through this latest product deep dive with Jon Stephenson from SoundStack. Jon, how are you doing today?
Doing well, Bryan. How are you doing? Thanks
I'm
for having me on your show.
so good, Jon, so good. I'm excited to dig through this because we've had a chance to talk and work together for a long time, but I think it's really important to lay the groundwork first of what is SoundStack, because SoundStack is a rebrand or a combination of several different companies coming together. So I'm going to pass that over to you to walk us through that.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. So SoundStack was originally created as a company that I founded called Empire Streaming back in 2010. So basically 12 years ago. Our premise back then as a company was really to focus on helping live audio publishers, so OTA over-the-air radio stations and internet-only radio stations to distribute their content. And the whole premise of the company back then, and still is true to today through SoundStack, is to help publishers to get access to different tools, not only to distribute their content, but first and foremost, also monetize it so they can make a sustainable digital audio ecosystem for their platform. So today we are an audio as a service company, and we help publishers, anyone from an enterprise level publisher like a podcast network or over-the-air radio groups, and also other hosting platforms to distribute and monetize their content on the internet. And one of the unique things about us is that we're fully bootstrapped. So we have just over 70 full-time employees. And we're 100% independent. So our stakeholders are ultimately our partners and our customers. And our mission ultimately as a company is to simplify audio for both the creator aspect and also for advertisers to fuel the digital audio ecosystem.
I think that's really exciting because I think we're in a point in podcasting where we started very technical and hands-on, especially in the audio space. Everything was technical. And I think that's where you saw a lot of your success to start. And I think it kind of rubber banded back to a lot of like, just kind of upload your file and we'll take care of it for you. And that's why we saw the push for so many hosting platforms. But with consolidation and whatnot, there are many partners out there at all levels that are evaluating whether or not a completely different company's process and roadmap and goals really align with what they need from their technology partner or what they want to offer to their clients as well. So we're in this really cool growth phase of podcasting, of audio, where tools like yours will allow people to kind of offer their own service from a handful of products that you offer and really kind of drive their own thing, pick and choose what they want to build themselves versus what they want to add in there. And they can start off as simple as just loading everything up directly with you and then moving on to, self-managed too, it sounds like.
Yep, no, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, again, our customers and partners are our stakeholders. So one of the unique things with us is, yeah, if there's a suggestion that you have, if there's a particular need, I mean, we are definitely all ears and we're here to make your success our success as well. So
awesome. So really excited today because there's three facets of SoundStack that we're going to dig into. One is like the podcast and distribution side. The other part of it is broadcast to podcast, which has really been very popular over the last few years in acquisitions and podcasting. And finally, the monetization solution. Jon, I'm really excited for us to dig in and start off with the podcaster side.
Awesome. Yeah. So let's go ahead and dig in. And you should be seeing the UI now. So this is our podcaster content management system. The reason why we built Podcaster was first and foremost a focus on DAI, dynamic ad insertion, and also things like white labeling. So we have many different partners that either utilize the CMS, which is the UI that you see here, in very much a white label fashion. And I'm just going to hop over to staging environment.
Look at that.
See the beautiful Sounds Profitable logo. You can have a hosting platform up and running this afternoon if you want. So white labeling is definitely one aspect of the podcaster content management system. And then also just the underlying dynamic ad insertion and programmatic enablement with what we work with many different partners, including Blueberry on, to focus on giving their creators ultimately access to monetization tools that many of the larger companies ultimately have. So digging into the UI, as you can see here, we are within a demo organization that I set up for today. And you can see you can manage multiple different shows. So I have 3 different fictitious shows, which maybe they'll eventually become a real show at some point in the future. But yeah, you can ultimately manage all of your different shows through our podcaster content management system. We have different things like grouping, You can associate it to a different publisher in the system. So this is really beneficial for particularly over-the-air radio groups. So like a group, for example, if you're a larger OTA that operates across a bunch of different designated market areas, so like different regions, you can actually segment your podcasts relative to those. Or if they ultimately belong to a radio station, which also ties into like our broadcast to podcast tool, which we'll be going through as well. You can do that as part of like your repurposed content. So if you imagine you have hundreds of different shows here as part of your workflow, it's easy to show the different association and kind of streamline all of that.
Well, it's smart because two different levels of filtering is really attractive, whether you use them specifically how you said or use them for your own custom purposes. This is a tool that it sounds like if I'm a big enough company, this is the right way for me to go in here and really have control over what my clients see and what my customers see and how everything works together. So having those features are really great. This UI here, you showed me the default SoundStack one, the branded one with Sounds Profitable, which I'm incredibly flattered on. I assume that in this situation, I can also build my own UI and make calls directly to all of this.
Yeah, so we have many different platforms that work with us in kind of a couple of different ways. So we also work with many partners to do the content delivery aspect with DAI on top of it. So if you already have your own existing hosting platform, we would basically sit in front of your end listener. So you would keep your entire hosting platform, your analytics, all of your different user management, your players. We kind of just sit as a layer in between all of that. Very similar to how most hosting platforms are working with like Amazon CloudFront or Cloudflare or all of the different like content delivery networks out there. But our purpose for being a CDN is very much first and foremost focused on that DAI and then coupling it with things like programmatic or if you want to use our own ad decisioning or plug in a different third-party ad server, you can do all of that and work with our team to configure that.
I like that. Well, let's break down the CDN thing for a bit for everybody to understand. So dynamic ad insertion is when a download request comes in. And in that moment, it says, what are the available ad breaks and how many ads are in each of those breaks for this episode? What campaigns do I have available? And is it the right fit? And so then it tries to put them all together. It says, well, I have these 4 audio files. I have these 4 places to put the audio files. Stitching together is the process of, for that unique download, combining them. Now, that unique download might not be completely unique. There might be 100 people who get that exact same download, during that specific day, or even over a week because the combinations just work out the same. But the process of taking those 4 audio files from the ads and combining it with that episode into one unique file is stitching. And stitching is probably one of the hardest parts about dynamic ad insertion. I think we see a lot of people out there that do like the host-enabled ad insertion, which is a finite number of combinations. And the focus there really is they build those combinations immediately, store all of those in their CDN, and you're good to go. But with dynamic ad insertion, you need to be willing to make that custom creation in that moment. That request is completely unique in that moment. And that's the value here, is that SoundStack can provide it A to Z, hosting, ad serving, and the CDN aspect with stitching. But they also, if you're a hosting platform and you're not able to do the stitching yourself or you don't want to dig into it, it is intensive, then you can just use the stitching and the CDN aspect from SoundStack, still take advantage of all of the other benefits of your platform and not lose any of your identity there. I think that's a really key thing to think about as partners realize how easy it could be for them to have their own hosting platform or just to be a little bit more in control of everything they set up. With the core still being SoundStack, the attractive thing here is that this infrastructure can be IAB certified and it can be set up for things like Spotify pass-through. 2 really important things in the industry that can be gatekeepers financially, can stop you from being able to get your maximum monetization potential. So by rallying around a piece of software that multiple people can use, it allows SoundStack to build that up more and more for its existing clients and make sure those things are set.
Yep. Yeah, no, you're absolutely right, Brian. Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, especially as even podcasts become more transacted programmatically, there's infinite number of different versions of that podcast. And there's a lot that ultimately goes into it too, including like, volume matching, all of that kind of stuff. So there's many different permutations of, the exact same podcast episode that could be delivered uniquely to every single user. And one of the big value propositions here is we handle all of that stitching and delivery. But if you want to plug into our programmatic marketplace, you can do that with a click of a button. Or if you want to use another third party, you can have like an ad server or another SSP sit on top of it. And we have our own proprietary ad decisioning engine that basically does all of that in real time to enable that for publishers and ultimately the partners that we work with.
Fantastic.
Yeah, so digging into the UI, the groups and publishers, so it's definitely very useful for content management. But if you also think about things like viewing your analytics and also things around just trafficking dynamic ads as well, that's where it becomes very important too, especially if you have dozens of radio stations and again, like even hundreds of different shows. It becomes useful as a tool basically, so you're not having to manually associate things on the back end or download CSVs and try to, do VLOOKUPs and pivot tables and all those kinds of fun things. So there's a lot. I know it's just two little drop downs right now, but there's a lot that these associations power for particularly enterprise publishers that have scale in terms of content.
And can I set permissions based on groups and publishers?
Yes, so you can do that. So we basically have role-based access control, and there's different levels. So there's like an admin that belongs to the organization. So you basically have superpower to edit and view everything. If you want to traffic campaigns against a specific group in our SoundStack monetized product, you can do all of that. If you want to give people access or particular user access to only specific shows or to view analytics of specific shows, you can do all of that. So there's definitely some pretty granular levels of control that you can do, which is ultimately really beneficial as you have, dozens or hundreds of different people that are accessing your content.
I agree. I think that's probably the most consistent part of an enterprise platform is user control.
Yep. No, definitely. Security is a big thing. Cool. Just to kind of go through a couple of the features from a high level. So we have a couple of different versions of shows. And the main reason for this is we want to enable it for anybody to manage all of their on-demand content from the same user interface. So we have the concept of programs, which is like a traditional podcast where you upload your audio content from. So you can either manually upload it to us or do like a broadcast to podcast as part of your workflow, and it's automatically going to upload the episode to it. We do have the concept of playlists, which is kind of unique to us. So playlists are basically an association and a collection of all of your different episodes in a program, and they're based on different like tagging rules. So a good example of this, if you have 10 different shows and you wanted to create a best of tag and add it to different episodes, so you can kind of curate a particular player or a dedicated RSS feed that you want to be able to give to your users. You can do that in a very seamless way and also dynamically, so you're not having to go and manually add episodes each time to a dedicated playlist. And this is really important definitely for things like discovery and whatnot, which is really awesome. And then also the concept of subscriptions. So we don't actually handle user management for like your end users if you're selling a subscription or do anything with payments. But again, being able to manage all of your on-demand content from one single interface. This is a plug and play way to basically get an authenticated RSS feed that then you can use with something like Supporting Cast and have it interface directly with Podcaster.
Smart. And each of those are basically outputs of RSS feeds, right? So program being like ideally like all of Sounds Profitable, but considering Sounds Profitable as like our narrated articles now, the download, it has, I have Ad Tech Applied, and Tom Webster is going to be having his own segment too, his own show on there as well. I could then create a playlist that splits each one of those in there for different aspects of my site. And if I wanted to do a subscription feed that doesn't have the ads but does have the content, I can create now 3 different layers that all have the right output, and now it can be automated. Now, because of tagging and because of how I set it up, I know one doesn't have ads. I know one automatically is where I put all my content, and by tagging it correctly, it gets into the right playlist. Is that accurate?
That's definitely one implementation of it. Yeah, I mean, there's many different ways you could do it. So the use case that you gave is a perfect example of what you can do with the 3 different versions of shows.
I like that flexibility. I think we tend to think about a show as too self-contained, and you put it in that show and it just lives in that show. But there's a lot of really cool things out there. There are companies out there that create those aggregate playlist feeds that pull in one season of their audio drama, and then in the next season it's a different audio drama, and they add some additional episodes to it. really creative ways to reuse content. And we talk about reusing content a lot in podcasting, from audio into video, audio into text, but this is a fantastic tool that will let you do audio into more audio.
Yep, absolutely. Cool. So I'm going to drill down into an episode level. So this is, again, a fictitious show called Stacker in the Morning. Just a couple of quick things to highlight. So we do have the concept to obviously edit different things on your RSS feed and be able to do things, again, back to the group and publisher association. You can do the tagging here. So this is basically going to add those tags automatically to any episode. If you upload a new episode to this program, for example. And we also support things like Podcasting 2.0, which has been over the past, I would say, 4 to 6 months, a request from a couple of different customers. We added a couple of quick wins there to be able to support that.
Let's highlight that for a second. I think that Podcasting 2.0 is very interesting, and there's a lot of really cool ideas coming out there. And I think that a lot of the pushback comes from the fact that we need adoption for a handful of them from the major podcast players, but there's a substantial amount of them that just benefit podcasters, regardless of what app picks up the RSS feed. So hearing that you guys in this stage of where you are, I mean, you rebranded this year and you've innovated quite a bit this year to already have 2 Podcasting 2.0 features there. I'd like to highlight that as a great sign that you do listen to client feedback and you're willing to innovate quickly.
Yeah, no, definitely. And even expanding upon that, I mean, one of the ideas is to help promote and even make some additional new standards for the Podcasting 2.0 initiative, especially with, seeing hopefully more clients like players and whatnot to be able to adopt those standards. So things like actually being able to stream a podcast, not a progressive download, but an actual stream. There's a lot of different powerful stuff there. So being able to take some of these new standards and then also help to hopefully embrace them and offer feedback to those standards. I mean, that's definitely something that is a huge part of our focus and is going to help ultimately power more of the industry.
Heck yeah.
Cool. So we also have a embed player, which is the concept to basically have all of your different episodes show. So this is also something like if you on your website had a playlist, you could generate a player on the fly for this and basically embed it on your website with an iframe. You can do things like customizing the theme. So you have the concept of, 2 themes that are basically built out of the box, a light and dark one, or if you wanted to change different colors, you can change like the background color and all of that, and basically take this and embed it on your website. So that's definitely really beneficial for things like curation and whatnot. To expand on this, I mean, one of the things that we're heavily working on in the back end is to get more granular analytics around this, because ultimately you have that direct connection with the end user, the listener, and being able to offer better things like, a listen through rate, like how long has somebody listened to my 33-minute and 35-second podcast? Where did they drop off? What did an ad cause fatigue of, people ending my show at 15 minutes into it? So there's a lot of cool stuff. And as more adoption happens through these players, we're going to be able to get better analytics, better insights into who our audience is, but then ultimately what are they doing and what's kind of their behaviors behind it. So basic right now, but there's a lot on our roadmap in 2023 to focus on bringing more power to the publishers.
I think there's a lot of value in having data, even if it's not a substantial amount, about the podcast player on your website that can really tailor what does and doesn't work for you and give you insight into what additional content to build or how to highlight it.
Yep, no, absolutely. It's better to start collecting it now and then figure out how you're going to use some of it later, as long as it's legally connected or collected. But yeah, I mean, there's definitely a lot you can do there for sure. I'm actually going to skip over analytics because that's actually going to be a future product deep dive sometime next year, because we do have a substantial release for it. So in the interest of time, I'm going to skip over that. But yeah, in terms of settings on the show, again, it's purpose built for audio monetization. So there's a lot of things you could do just to automatically enable pre-rolls, things like your post-roll, add multiple ads, which sounds a little bit funny saying it out loud, but yeah, so this is also the concept if you have like mid-rolls, and particularly for longer form content, if you want to insert multiple ads into a single ad break, you can do that. So you're not limited by just a single dynamic ad for a mid-roll position, or you have to add multiple mid-roll positions basically back to back. You can support the concept of being able to insert up to 3 ads currently. We did have a request to do it up to 4, so that's probably something that'll be on a roadmap here very shortly. But yeah, you can basically have multiple ads within the same single ad break. And again, for things like over-the-air radio shows, like morning show or whatever, a lot of those ad breaks are typically like at 8 minutes. So listeners are typically pretty used to listening to them with longer ad breaks. We also have the concept of Splice. So Splice is our broadcast the podcast tool. This is basically the entry point for that content to come into our podcaster content management system. So you're going to do things like different naming templates. So if you have a morning show, you could use a macro that basically is the name of the podcast, or you could even input specific text there and then give it a date, and it's going to make a unique podcast episode name each time, which is really beneficial. So you're not having to manually go up or manually update them each time, which is really beneficial as well to publishers. Again, focusing on making things very simple and very automated behind the scenes for publishers. Playlist content sharing. So if you wanted to have this program actually exist as part of a playlist, this just gives you a little bit more control over that. So if you had a program that you wanted to be standalone, you can make it so, ultimately it's not inheriting into a playlist based on different tags and all of that. RSS prefixes we ultimately support out of the gate, and then ultimately redirects. If you're moving it to another third party, you can redirect it off the platform as well.
These are some really great settings to templatize the show, right? To really define what it is. I love the way that in settings here, you're determining the structure for the show, how many ad breaks can be allowed, or how many different, like the types, pre-roll, mid-roll, post-roll, can multiple be there in a break. I think we tend to look at those a lot individually per episode on a lot of platforms. I think that setting some parameters for like a ceiling for the most you can do is attractive to me, because we do need to get a read of that. We do need consistency between episodes, maybe not necessarily between shows. Shows obviously have different patterns, but I think having that ceiling is really powerful there. And I do like, as we get into Splice, which will be the next section we talk about, I like the ability to say that this show can have spliced episodes in it, or this show can be part of playlists. Really determining the rules for this show in one location instead of being able to pull anything in or kick anything into it from the other destination.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, again, our whole product strategy is around giving control to publishers and then ultimately making it very simple. So that's our goal, and that's what we try to do.
Great.
We did touch a little bit on users. So, I mean, again, we have a whole role-based access control system, and this works across all of our different apps. So right now we're viewing the UI for our podcaster content management system, but we have a couple of different other user interfaces, like a dedicated insights dashboard for users to view analytics, things like our console, which sits on top of our SoundStack engine product, our monetized product. So all of the user accounts actually work across all of the different platforms using single sign-on. And again, you can get very granular in terms of how you want to give different privileges to different people within your organization, and do it in a view/read-only mode, or if you want to give specific, write privileges to somebody to be able to edit the show or edit a particular group of shows, you can definitely do all of that. And this is one place that you can manage users relative to a specific show, or we have account management that sits in another aspect of our products as well. So it's really made to give you that control and granularity that an enterprise product should.
Permissions are important.
Absolutely. Cool. And then lastly, at the show level, one of the things we did touch on a little bit before is the destinations. So a big one, like you mentioned, is Spotify, and why that's really important for things like dynamic ad insertion and ultimately analytics is traditionally, if your host isn't enabled for what's called Spotify pass-through, Spotify is effectively caching those podcast episodes. So they're still able to be discovered by a listener on the Spotify platform, but the actual podcast downloads not coming from that CDN layer, whether it's us or whether it's, a CloudFront or even just somebody's own dedicated hosting platform. And why that's important is ultimately for things like DAI, right? So if you're not able to interact directly with the listener, you're ultimately not able to insert ads. So I think a big thing, and we've seen some decent traction from podcast hosts just over the past couple of years of getting enabled for Spotify pass-through, is very much focused on that DAI aspect. So you can actually monetize your whole audience, not everybody but Spotify. And then also things like analytics. So if you're thinking about, computing IAB certified analytics or however you want to compute the analytics there, the listener request that when a person listens to a podcast on Spotify ultimately has to make it to the server that is actually delivering the episode and not one of Spotify's servers. So this is definitely something that is very heavily used by our publishers. And again, is very much for things like DAI on top of it.
And pass-through isn't as easy to get anymore. I mean, in the few years that we've been running Sounds Profitable, it was a little bit easier. You just needed to show intent and apply for it. And now it's really important. They want to see that, your platform has active users, has enough volume and interest in dynamic ad insertion, which means kind of taking the risk, right? Serving ads that are everywhere but Spotify while waiting for approval there. So I really think this is a glowing endorsement as a white label product here that you already have this, because it really means that somebody who really wants to get up and running this afternoon with their own hosting platform and ad server doesn't have to sacrifice anything and wait for approval. And that's really important there, because it's not only just the analytics, don't end up in your hosting platform. It's that Spotify's analytics in their platform are not the IAB standards. So now you're comparing two complete different set of analytics if you don't have pass through, regardless of even if you're serving ads, can be a big headache.
Yep, no, absolutely. And the last thing that I want to go through in the UI is at the episode level. So I'm just going to show you this really quick as well. So we have the concept of an audio editor, which allows you to do things like marking different ad placements and whatnot within your podcast episode. So here in this podcast, you can do things like control the pre-roll and post-roll at the episode level, and then also do things for marking your mid-roll insertion or replacement. One of the unique things with what this audio editor has is you can do an insertion, which is an example of this red marker right here. Basically, the way an insertion will work is if we have that marked, we can insert an ad, and it's going to basically dynamically extend the length of the show. But we also have the concept of replacement, and this is really important for things like over-the-air radio. If you want to take out your simulcasted commercials and do a replacement with those for DAI, or if you have a host read ad that you eventually want to remove and replace it with DAI, you can do all of that here, which is this example of a blue waveform, which has the ad ultimately marked to remove it from the episode as well.
Now, if you mark that and you don't serve an ad to where that new break is, will it just play the original, or does it just compress it and take out the blue area?
It will remove the actual content. Yeah, so it'll
awesome.
Compress it. It'll just shrink the size of the podcast.
I think that's really great. I mean, like you said, for the ad versions, taking a broadcast show into a podcast, there's going to be ads already in that audio that you're going to want to overwrite or just outright remove, and being able to do it here instead of kicking it to an audio editor and all of that really saves some time. You can also use this method for cool content creation, which I'm really excited about, because there's so many times where like an intro would change, right, to your show, and being able to block that off and use an ad to override that intro, to me, is really attractive. To be able to have that intro change depend on the quadrant of the United States they're in. If you're going on tour, I love this replacement technology, and I love that it basically is a handshake between where we were with baked in, where we're moving with embedded, and then the true power of dynamic ad insertion, and further from that, programmatic. So very cool for you guys to have all of this in here.
Yeah, and again, the supply opportunities that these ultimately create can be plugged into ultimately our ad decisioning engine, our marketplace, our ad server, or if you have a third-party relationship with companies like Triton Digital or AdsWiz, or even if you want to use like Google Ad Manager for doing your trafficking of your audio ads, you can plug all of that in. And this is just the content aspect that is enabling and opening up those supply opportunities for your content. And that about wraps up the Podcaster content management system.